We are doing the UFC 312 fight card, Dricus du Plessis versus Sean Strickland. Let's get right into it. But remember, every Saturday we do a live watch party for each of these fight cards that happen for the UFC. I do want to move on to boxing in the future and BKFC and a bunch of other stuff, but currently we are just working on the UFC. So let's get right into today's video. This being Francisco Prado versus Jake Matthews. Jake is 20-7. His country is Australia. He stands at 5'11" tall. He weighed at 180 pounds and his last win has a reach of 73 inches and a leg reach of 43 inches. While Francisco, on the other hand, is 12-2. His country is Argentina. He stands at 5'10" tall. He weighed at 156 pounds and his last win has a reach of 69 inches and a leg reach of 38 inches. Jake Matthews has a 3-inch reach advantage, a 5-inch leg reach advantage. Jake has a 1-inch height advantage and he has a lot more wins on his record. As we've learned from last week's card, experience does do a lot better. MVP fought Shara Bullet. Shara Bullet undefeated currently undefeated, no longer is, thanks to MVP's skills. Still a lot of controversy on that fight right now. People finding it boring and all of this. I understand it wasn't the most spectacular fight to watch, but if you look at it skillfully, MVP was better. MVP committed more. MVP wanted the fight, while Shara Bullet kind of was waiting too long. He was holding his punches, wasn't working, wasn't doing what he needed to do, but MVP had a style that was uncomfortable for Shara Bullet to do anything. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about this fight, where the reach, again, like last week, a lot of the reach last week had quite the distance, and this one is no different. It has quite a distance. So Jake Matthews should keep it long, keep it behind his jab, start with the jab, use his backhand. A lot of UFC guys, or at least, even though they do have forms of striking, they don't stick to using their jab for some reason. Stick out that jab, because that's going to take you the whole fight, because you can find your range and assert dominance very quickly, which a lot of these guys don't do. Assert dominance and find their range. Obviously for Francisco, it's not that easy. He can't just stick out his jab and reach Jake. He has to take a risk and get on the inside. He has to be the one who takes the risks, while Jake doesn't really have to do much in this fight. He can keep it long. He could do what MVP did, not with the whole band stuff, but keep it nice and long. Stick the jab out there, keep it a distance, don't back up too far, and don't go straight back. Cut angles. But let's move on to win buys to see how they've got it done in their previous fights. With Francisco having a 50% KO, 50% submission, 0% decision, with an average fight time sitting at 11 minutes and a knockdown average of 0. While Jake Matthews, on the other hand, has a 30% KO, 35% submission and a 35% decision, with an average fight time sitting at 12 minutes and a knockdown average of 0. Although Jake has the reach, most of his wins are coming by decisions and submissions, but if we take the decisions out of the equation, it's submissions that he mainly goes for, which means Jake will have to get in clinches and cut down the range himself. That means his reach, yes, he has knockouts, and I believe that he should use his reach to keep a distance, but if his game plan for this one is grappling, which I don't really think it should be, I think he should stick on the back foot or even the front foot and just work his striking. But if he does want to cut down the range and cut down that distance, he can probably do that quite easily. But again, I don't feel that it's necessary for him to take that risk. He shouldn't put himself in a position where Francisco can either submit him by getting in a clinch and taking it down, or him getting knocked out. I think he should keep it long, but if he is to go with the grappling, he can get in range quite quickly, create the clinch, create the angles, and get the takedown. That doesn't mean Francisco can't either. Francisco definitely can, because if Jake's gonna cut down the distance, create the angles, Francisco can capitalize on that. He can take advantage of that as well, especially when it comes to getting in a clinch. That would depend on whose grappling is better. That will just show whose grappling is better in this fight. But for Francisco, I do think that yes, he should strike and should definitely try and knock out Jake. I think also he should try and go for the grappling. He should try and get on the inside, because he has to cut down the range anyways. I feel like it's better if you just completely cut it down. If you can't manage the distance, if you can't cut down that range and keep that distance where you can work and make it uncomfortable for Jake, you always have to be moving. For Francisco to win, he has to keep moving. He can't stay as a stationary target. For Jake, a bit of the same thing, but he has to kind of back up a bit. He has to have, not balance in style, but he has to be on his toes a bit more, because he has to move very quickly to keep that range. While Francisco, he's got to throw out the feints, move his head, get on the inside, get them takedowns. But let's move on to significant strikes to see how they performed on the feet in their previous fights. With Jake Matthews having 3 punches landed per minute, 44% significant strikes, an average of 3 punches absorbed per minute with a defense of 61%. While Francisco Prado, on the other hand, has an average of 5 punches landed per minute, 41% significant strikes, an average of 6 punches absorbed per minute with a defense of 52%. This is just based off the stats in their previous fight, and if we're saying that this is how this fight would play out as well, Jake just needs to keep on the feet. Yes, he needs to have a bit of a better output, or at least landing accuracy. I wish they had landing accuracy and the landing output, or thrown output, sorry. They should have that, because then I can see here and be like, okay, this is how he performed in his last fight completely. The significant strikes, it's not going to be amazing, it's not going to be spectacular. I don't expect too much from that, because it's hard to make sure that all your strikes are damaging. But when it comes to the key factors in this one, at least, is the absorbing, because Francisco absorbed 6 punches in his last fight, while Jake only absorbed 3. Now, if Jake can keep the technique of keeping it nice and long and landing those strikes, Francisco could have a hard time. Francisco's defense was okay. It was worse than Jake's. Jake's was very good. So which means Jake should be able to control, hopefully be able to manage and control the distance, and probably will keep it on the feet based off his last fight. But Francisco is going to struggle I'm assuming he doesn't really move his head off the center line as much. His guard must be pretty poor, but if Jake wants to go with a high output, keep that range, I feel like he would win in a fairly dominant fashion on the feet. But Francisco, he landed more, had a little bit of a worse significant strike percentage. I feel he could do very well on the inside, but Jake has to make sure he can't do that. And if Francisco does get on the inside, he has to get out of range quick enough or land a few to stop the onslaught. That's what Francisco should do, is try and onslaught Jake. But let's move on to the grappling to see how they performed in the grappling in their previous fight. With Francisco having a 0 takedown average, a 0% takedown accuracy, a 25% takedown defense, a submission average of 0, while Jake Matthews, on the other hand, had an average of 2 takedowns, 41% takedown accuracy, 64% takedown defense, with a submission average of 1. Francisco not getting a single takedown in his previous fight. I'm assuming he didn't attempt any, but his takedown defense was very poor, which means Jake Matthews, he had a 41% takedown accuracy with a 2 takedown average, so that's very high. That percentage is very high for that amount. I've seen people have the same amount but have a much lower percentage. Now, a takedown defense of 64%, very good. But how does Francisco's grappling compare to yours? It does appear that Francisco's takedown defense is very, very poor, which could be a huge factor going into this one if Jake does choose the route of grappling, because it appears he could get it down quite easily. But how does Francisco's defense compare to Jake Matthews' takedown knowledge? Their submission average is very close, but obviously if it's 0.5 or above, we will round it down up to 1, and if it's below that, we will round it down to 0. That's how I work. Yes, Francisco did attempt submissions, not enough to... It's a stupid way of doing it. He basically attempted submissions. So did Jake, but Jake attempted more because Jake was given the advantages to. And I feel that Jake, if it goes into a grappling, Jake could perform a lot better, at least getting the takedowns. Now, how does it perform on the grappling? On the ground completely? That's a different story, because it doesn't show here who does the better at scrambling and all of that. It just says who can get takedowns and how was their takedown defense. That's really all we get. We don't really get any grappling stats, just takedown stats. No, who initiated clinches, how did they perform in the clinch and stuff like that. Obviously, if you're going off of significant strikes, you can kind of base it off of that, but you don't really know how many clinches there were to go off of that. Basing it off of the stats, Jake Matthews has the longer reach, has the longer leg reach, has the better significant strikes percentage. Not the best output though, or landed at least, so maybe his accuracy is quite poor. Has the better defense and has absorbed less. He also has the better takedown average, better takedown accuracy, better takedown defense, and also a higher submission average, and I think he had the higher knockdown average. This fight goes into Jake's favor. The whole stats go into Jake's favor. But that doesn't mean Francisco, because this is based off a different opponent than Francisco. Francisco could come out here and do something completely different and dominate and beat him. But based off the stats, not based off of the whole 15 minutes fight, but I like to just base my videos off the stats anyways. But basing it off of these stats, Jake Matthews should win. So how do I think this fight plays out? I think it stays on the feet. I think it does go to the ground, and I think Jake's going to be the one that initiates it to go to the ground. And I think Jake will control this fight on the feet and in the grappling. But that is just my thoughts and my opinions. What do you guys think? Who do you think wins? And how do you think they win? Apart from that, I'll catch you in a bit. Take care. Peace.